I remember the chill that ran down my spine the moment I heard it, a whisper so soft it could have been the wind, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 thunderclaps. It was a Tuesday, the kind of crisp autumn day in New York when the air itself felt charged with possibility, or perhaps with impending doom. Vincent Moretti, Vinny to those who dared to speak his name with familiarity, had just pulled his gleaming black Cadillac Eldorado into the gas station on the corner of Mulberry and Grand. The attendant, a young man with eyes that darted like trapped birds, leaned in close as he topped off the tank. Vinny, ever observant, caught the subtle tremor in the boy's hand, the way his gaze flickered to the undercarriage of the car. Then came the words, barely audible above the city's hum, a desperate, hurried breath. "Bomb in your car." The world seemed to hold its breath with me. Vinny didn't flinch, not outwardly. His expression remained a mask of cool indifference, a testament to years spent perfecting the art of concealment. But I knew him, or at least, I knew the legend of him. I knew the gears turning behind those dark, intelligent eyes. He simply nodded, a slow, deliberate gesture, and handed the attendant a crisp $50 bill, far more than the service required. The boy's eyes widened, a mix of fear and gratitude, as Vinny slid back into the driver's seat. The engine purred to life, a deceptive lullaby before the storm. The air crackled with unspoken danger, a silent promise of violence hanging heavy over the bustling street. The city, oblivious, continued its relentless dance, unaware of the deadly secret now hurtling through its veins. It was October 17th, 1958, and the city of New York pulsed with a raw, untamed energy. The scent of exhaust fumes mingled with roasting chestnuts, and the cacophony of honking taxis and distant jazz spilled from open windows. This was Vinny Moretti's domain, a sprawling empire built on loyalty, fear, and an unyielding code of honor. At 32, Vinny was a force of nature, a man carved from the very stone of the old country, yet refined by the sharp edges of American ambition. His dark hair, slicked back with pomade, framed a face that could have graced a movie screen, sharp jawline, piercing eyes, a smile that rarely reached them. He wore his Italian suits like a second skin, each stitch a testament to his status, his power. But it was the ink that truly told his story. Intricate swirling patterns of saints and serpents snaking up his neck, disappearing beneath his collar, and adorning the backs of his hands, symbols of a life lived on the razor's edge. He was a man of immense power, yet beneath the polished exterior lay a soul burdened by the weight of his choices, a deep emotional current that few ever glimpsed. His world, however, was not entirely devoid of light. Isabella Rossi, a vision of elegance and grace, was that light. She was a singer, her voice a smoky, soulful melody that could silence a crowded room and stir the deepest corners of Vinny's heart. Her raven hair, styled in soft waves that framed her exquisite face, her eyes, dark and expressive, held a wisdom beyond her years. She moved with the effortless charm of a bygone era, her dresses tailored to perfection, always reflecting the sophisticated glamour of the late 50s. Isabella was not merely a beautiful woman. She was a woman of substance, her spirit as fiery as her stage presence. Their connection was a complex tapestry of passion, unspoken understanding, and a shared vulnerability that Vinny rarely allowed himself. She was the one person past the boss, past the tattoos, past to the man beneath. And now, that man, the one who loved her fiercely, was driving a car with a hidden threat, a ticking clock that threatened to shatter their fragile world. The initial conflict was stark. Vinny's life, and by extension, Isabella's peace, was under direct assault. The whisper at the gas pump wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration of war, a challenge to his very existence. Before we continue, drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The gas station, a relic of chrome and neon, hummed with the mundane rhythm of a Friday afternoon. Vinny, his hand resting casually on the steering wheel, felt the subtle vibration of the engine, a sound he usually found comforting, now laced with a sinister undertone. He had always prided himself on his instincts, a sixth sense honed in the brutal streets of Little Italy. The attendant's fear, the quick, furtive glance, the almost imperceptible tremor in his voice, it all painted a picture Vinny understood intimately. This wasn't a random act. It was a message, precise and deadly. He pulled away from the pump, his Cadillac Eldorado, a symbol of his success, now a potential coffin. The car, a magnificent machine of steel and leather, glided effortlessly through the bustling streets, past women in cinched waist dresses and men in fedoras, past storefronts displaying the latest fashions and diners serving up hot coffee and apple pie. The city was alive, vibrant, and utterly unaware of the silent drama unfolding within Vinny's luxurious vehicle. He drove with a deceptive calm, his eyes scanning the rearview mirror, not for pursuit, but for any sign of an anomaly, a flicker of movement that didn't belong. His mind raced, sifting through recent events, rivalries, old debts. Who would dare? The code of honor, the unwritten laws that governed his world, dictated that such a direct assault was a declaration of war, a challenge that could not go unanswered. He lit a Camel cigarette, the familiar taste of tobacco, a small comfort in the rising tide of tension. The smoke curled around his fingers, momentarily obscuring the intricate tattoo of a coiled serpent on his left hand. He thought of Isabella, her laughter echoing in his mind, her scent clinging to his memory. The thought of her, even remotely, being caught in the crossfire of his dangerous life, was a torment he could barely endure. He had built a fortress around her, a gilded cage of protection, but this threat was insidious, designed to strike at him where he felt safest. He knew he couldn't simply drive to his usual garage. That would be too obvious, too predictable. He needed a place discreet, a man he could trust implicitly, someone who understood the delicate dance between life and death in his world. His thoughts drifted to old Sal, a mechanic who had seen more than his fair share of unusual car troubles over the decades. Sal operated out of a dimly lit garage in a forgotten corner of Brooklyn, a place where questions were never asked, and secrets were buried deep beneath layers of grease and oil. The tension in the car was a palpable thing, a living entity breathing down his neck. Every bump in the road, every sudden stop, sent a jolt of adrenaline through him. He imagined the device, cold and metallic, waiting patiently for its moment. The dramatic irony was not lost on him. A man who commanded an empire, reduced to a passenger in his own potential demise. The city lights began to twinkle as dusk settled, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to mock his predicament. He gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles white, the weight of his world pressing down on him. The silence in the car was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the turn signal as he navigated the labyrinthine streets, heading towards an uncertain fate. Vinny pulled the Cadillac into Sal's dimly lit garage, the air thick with the smell of oil and stale cigarettes. Sal, a man whose face was a roadmap of wrinkles and wisdom, emerged from beneath a lifted Ford Fairlane, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. His eyes, sharp and knowing, met Vinny's. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Sal simply gestured towards the hydraulic lift. Vinny parked the car, his movements precise, deliberate. As the Cadillac slowly ascended, revealing its underbelly, Vinny's gaze was fixed, unwavering. And there it was, a crude but effective device, strapped to the chassis near the fuel tank. A small cylindrical object, wires snaking from it, a timer clearly visible, ticking down with an unnerving rhythm. It wasn't sophisticated, but it was undeniably real. The sight of it sent a cold wave through Vinny, not of fear for himself, but of a chilling realization. This was personal, a message meant to terrorize, not just to kill. "Looks like someone wants to send you to an early grave, Vinny," Sal grunted, his voice raspy. Vinny merely nodded, his jaw tight. "Any idea who?" Sal asked, already reaching for his tools. Vinny shook his head. "Not yet, but I'll find out." His voice was low, laced with a dangerous calm. He thought of Isabella again, her vibrant presence, her innocent belief in a world that was far gentler than his own. This threat wasn't just against him, it was against the fragile peace he had found with her. He remembered a conversation they'd had just last week, sitting in a dimly lit booth at the Blue Note, her hand resting lightly on his. She had spoken of dreams, of a life beyond the city's shadows, a life he secretly yearned for but knew he could never truly have. The code of honor, the loyalty to his family, the debts he owed and those owed to him. They were chains, gilded perhaps, but chains nonetheless. The bomb was disarmed with a practiced ease that belied the danger. Sal cut the wires, the timer freezing at 00:03. A collective breath was held, then released. Vinny paid Sal handsomely, a thick wad of bills exchanged without a word. As he drove away, the Cadillac now safe, the weight in his chest remained. This wasn't over. This was merely the opening salvo. He knew he had to act, not just for his own survival, but for Isabella's. He couldn't allow his world to bleed into hers, to taint her with the darkness he inhabited. The revelation of the bomb had deepened his resolve, but it had also deepened his emotional turmoil. He was a man torn between two worlds, the brutal, unforgiving reality of his empire, and the tender, vulnerable sanctuary he found in Isabella's arms. The conflict between duty and emotion was never starker. He had to protect her, even if it meant pushing her away, even if it meant making choices that would break his own heart. The streets of New York, once a symbol of his power, now felt like a labyrinth of shadows, each one hiding a potential enemy, each one a reminder of the constant vigilance required to survive. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button. It helps me bring more stories like this to you. The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations, late-night meetings in smoke-filled back rooms, and the quiet, methodical work of Vinny's most trusted men. The complication arose not from a direct confrontation, but from a subtle, insidious leak within his own ranks. Information, sensitive details about his movements, had reached the wrong ears. It pointed to an inside job, a betrayal that cut deeper than any external threat. Vinny's face, usually a mask of control, now bore the faint lines of exhaustion, his eyes shadowed. He sat in his opulent office, the scent of expensive cigar smoke clinging to the velvet drapes, a glass of amber whiskey untouched on his mahogany desk. The betrayal was a poison, slowly seeping into the foundations of his empire, threatening to unravel everything he had built. The emotional stakes soared when Isabella, unknowingly, became a pawn in this dangerous game. Our rival family, sensing Vinny's vulnerability, began to subtly pressure the owner of the Blue Note, where Isabella performed nightly. Her gigs, once secure, became uncertain. Her manager, a nervous man named Frankie, called Vinny, his voice trembling. "They're leaning on me, Vinny, asking questions about Isabella, about your connection." Vinny felt a cold fury ignite within him. This was a line that should never have been crossed. His world was one of violence and retribution, but Isabella was sacred, untouchable. The thought of her beautiful voice being silenced, her spirit dimmed by the shadows of his life, was unbearable. He knew he had to act, and swiftly. He called a meeting with his capos, their faces grim in the flickering candlelight. "Someone talked," Vinny stated, his voice low, dangerous. "Someone sold us out, and now they're touching what's mine." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken threats. The code of honor demanded swift, brutal justice for betrayal. But Vinny knew that a rash move could expose Isabella further. He had to navigate this treacherous path with surgical precision. He thought of his father, a man of the old ways, who had taught him that loyalty was the bedrock of their world, and betrayal, the ultimate sin. The memory of his father's stern gaze, his unwavering principles, echoed in Vinny's mind, a constant reminder of the heavy crown he wore. He sent word to the rival family, a carefully worded message delivered by a trusted intermediary, warning them to back off Isabella. The response was a veiled threat, a reminder of their own power, their own reach. Vinny knew this was a test, a challenge to his authority, designed to push him to the brink. He looked at the framed photograph on his desk. Isabella, smiling, her eyes sparkling with life. He couldn't let them touch her. He wouldn't. The complication wasn't just a bomb. It was a web of deceit and ambition, threatening to ensnare the one person who made his brutal existence bearable. The weight of his decisions pressed down on him, a heavy cloak of responsibility. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, demanding sacrifices he wasn't yet ready to contemplate. The climax arrived on a rain-slicked night, the kind where the city seemed to weep alongside its inhabitants. Vinny had arranged a meeting, a parley with the head of the rival family, Don Carlo Rossi, no relation to Isabella, but a name that now tasted like ash in Vinny's mouth. The location was a deserted warehouse by the docks, a place where deals were struck and blood was often spilled. Vinny arrived in his Lincoln Continental, its dark paint gleaming under the streetlights, accompanied by only two of his most loyal men. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, his silk tie a splash of crimson against the somber fabric. The tattoos on his hands seemed to pulse with a life of their own, symbols of his unwavering commitment to his world. Don Carlo was already there, flanked by his own enforcers, their faces hard, unyielding. The air crackled with unspoken hostility, the scent of damp concrete mingling with the metallic tang of impending violence. Vinny stepped forward, his posture radiating a dangerous calm. "Carlo," he began, his voice low, steady. "We need to talk about lines that shouldn't be crossed." Carlo, a man whose eyes held the coldness of a winter night, merely sneered. "Lines? You speak of lines, Vinny, when your own house is crumbling?" He gestured vaguely, implying the internal betrayal Vinny was grappling with. "Perhaps you're losing your touch. Perhaps it's time for new blood." The insult hung heavy in the air, a direct challenge to Vinny's authority. But Vinny didn't react, not yet. He knew this was a test of his resolve, a probe for weakness. He lit a cigar, the tip glowing orange in the dim light, and took a slow, deliberate puff. The smoke curled upwards, a silent defiance. My house is strong, Carlo, Vinny replied, his voice gaining a dangerous edge, and those who try to burn it will find themselves consumed by the flames. He took another drag from his cigar. But we're not here to discuss my house. We're here to discuss Isabella Rossi. She is not part of this. She is off limits. Carlo chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. A singer? Such a delicate flower for a man like you, Vinny. Perhaps she is your weakness. The word struck Vinny like a physical blow, a direct hit at his most vulnerable point. For a fleeting moment, the mask slipped, and a flicker of raw emotion, a mix of fury and fear, crossed his face. He thought of Isabella, her vibrant spirit, her innocent belief in a world untouched by the darkness he inhabited. He couldn't let Carlo use her, taint her, or worse. This was the moment of decision. He could retaliate with immediate, brutal force, upholding the code of honor that demanded swift vengeance for such an insult. But that would escalate the conflict, potentially drawing Isabella further into the crossfire. Or he could find another way, a path that protected her, even if it meant a temporary loss of face, a moment of perceived weakness. He took a deep breath, the scent of the docks filling his lungs. His gaze met Carlo's, unwavering. She is not a weakness, Carlo, Vinny said, his voice now a low growl. She is my strength, and if you touch her again, if you even look in her direction, I will burn your empire to the ground, and I will do it myself. It was a moment of profound vulnerability, a powerful boss laying bare his deepest fear, his deepest love, for all to see. The air in the warehouse grew heavy, the unspoken threat hanging between them, more potent than any drawn weapon. Carlo's sneer faltered, replaced by a flicker of surprise, perhaps even a grudging respect. Vinny had shown his hand, but in doing so, he had also revealed the depth of his resolve. The decision was made. Isabella's safety, her peace, was paramount, even above the unyielding demands of his own brutal world. The revelation came not from a confession, but from a meticulously pieced-together trail of breadcrumbs. Vinny's men, working tirelessly, uncovered a series of clandestine meetings, coded messages, and illicit money transfers. The shocking truth was that the betrayal, the bomb, and the pressure on Isabella's club all stemmed from a single source: Marco, Vinny's own cousin, a man he had grown up with, a man he had trusted implicitly, even promoted within his ranks. Marco, consumed by envy and a desperate desire for power, had orchestrated the entire scheme, hoping to destabilize Vinny's position and seize control. The news hit Vinny like a physical blow, a betrayal far more devastating than any rival's attack. It wasn't just a challenge to his authority, it was a stab to the heart of his family, a violation of the sacred bonds that were supposed to be unbreakable. The emotions in Vinny were at their peak. Grief, rage, and a profound sense of disillusionment warred within him. He remembered Marco as a boy, sharing secrets, dreaming of a future together. Now, that future was shattered, replaced by a bitter, ugly reality. The code of honor, which he lived and breathed, demanded a brutal reckoning for such treachery. A cousin, a blood relative, betraying his own family for ambition. It was an unforgivable sin in their world. Vinny sat alone in his office, the city lights twinkling outside, oblivious to the storm raging within him. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, the amber liquid swirling, reflecting the turmoil in his eyes. He thought of Isabella, her unwavering faith in him, her belief in the good he rarely saw in himself. How could he reconcile this brutal betrayal with the fragile hope she represented? The twist was not just Marco's identity, but his motive. It wasn't just power. It was a desperate attempt to settle an old debt, a secret family obligation that Vinny's father had incurred years ago, a debt that Marco believed Vinny had neglected. Marco had been approached by a shadowy figure from the old country, a man who held leverage over him, threatening to expose a long-buried family secret that would have shamed them all. The bomb, the threats, they were not just about Vinny's downfall, but about Marco's desperate attempt to escape a past that haunted him, to fulfill an obligation he felt Vinny had ignored. It was a web of secrets, loyalties, and betrayals, stretching back generations, now finally unraveling in the harsh light of the present. Vinny understood the weight of family secrets, the burden of inherited debts, but Marco's actions had endangered innocent lives, had threatened Isabella. The revelation of the deeper motive didn't excuse the betrayal, but it added a layer of tragic complexity to it. Vinny was faced with an impossible choice: uphold the strict, unforgiving code of his world, or acknowledge the desperate circumstances that had driven his cousin to such a heinous act. The emotions were raw, exposed. The man who had once been a brother was now an enemy, driven by a desperate, misguided loyalty to a past Vinny barely remembered. The weight of his family's history, the intricate tapestry of honor and obligation, now rested squarely on his shoulders, demanding a resolution that would define his legacy. The resolution of the immediate crisis was swift and brutal, yet tinged with a profound sadness. Vinny confronted Marco not with a gun, but with the cold, hard truth of his betrayal, laying bare the evidence, the trail of deceit. Marco, cornered and broken, confessed, his ambition crumbling under the weight of his guilt and the inescapable gaze of his cousin. Vinny, adhering to the unyielding code of his world, could not allow such a betrayal to go unpunished. Marco was stripped of his rank, exiled from the family, his name erased from their history. It was a fate worse than death for a man who lived by the family's honor, a public shaming that would follow him for the rest of his days. The decision was Vinny's alone, a heavy burden that etched deeper lines into his handsome face. He had upheld the code, but at a cost that resonated deep within his soul. The consequences of Vinny's actions rippled through the city. The rival family, witnessing the swift and decisive way Vinny handled the internal threat, understood the depth of his power and the unwavering loyalty he commanded. Don Carlo backed off, the subtle pressures on Isabella's club ceasing as abruptly as they had begun. Vinny had reasserted his authority, his reputation solidified, but the victory felt hollow. The betrayal had left a scar, a reminder of the fragility of trust, even within the closest circles. He had protected Isabella, ensuring her safety and her peace, but the cost was a piece of his own heart, a fragment of his past that could never be reclaimed. He found himself spending more time at the Blue Note, listening to Isabella's soulful voice, finding solace in her presence, a quiet anchor in his turbulent world. One evening, after her set, Isabella found him sitting alone, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his gaze distant. She sat beside him, her hand gently covering his, her touch a balm to his weary spirit. "What troubles you, Vinny?" she asked, her voice soft, understanding. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for a moment, the powerful boss was just a man, vulnerable and burdened. He couldn't tell her the full truth, not yet, perhaps never, but he could offer her a glimpse into the sacrifices he made for her, for their fragile connection. "The world I live in, Bella," he said, his voice rough. "It demands things, sacrifices, sometimes from those you love most." She squeezed his hand, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "I know," she whispered. "And I know you carry it all, Vinny, for us." It was a moment of profound understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible choices he faced, the heavy crown he wore. The immediate danger had passed, but the echoes of betrayal and the weight of his responsibilities would forever shape his path. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. I post new Mafia stories 3 times a week. The city continued its relentless march, indifferent to the personal dramas unfolding within its concrete canyons. Vinny Moretti, the powerful boss, had faced a direct threat, a betrayal from within, and had emerged victorious, yet irrevocably changed. I often wonder about the choices he made that night, the silent battles he fought within himself. He upheld the code, yes, but he also protected the woman he loved, demonstrating a depth of emotion rarely seen in men of his stature. His legacy, I believe, was not just one of power and fear, but of a man grappling with the impossible conflict between duty and emotion, between the brutal demands of his world and the tender yearnings of his heart. The serpent's whisper had revealed not just a bomb, but the intricate, often tragic tapestry of loyalty, betrayal, and love that defined his existence. Isabella continued to sing, her voice a beacon of hope and beauty in a world often shrouded in darkness. Vinny, though forever marked by the events, found a quiet strength in her presence, a reason to navigate the treacherous waters of his empire. The story of the bomb, the betrayal, and the boss who chose love over blind vengeance became a whispered legend in the back alleys and smoke-filled rooms of Little Italy. It was a reminder that even in the most brutal of worlds, the human heart, with all its complexities and contradictions, could still find a way to beat, to love, to endure. The sacrifices he made, the choices he wrestled with, painted a portrait of a man who, despite his formidable power, was ultimately human, bound by the very emotions he tried so hard to conceal. His story, like the city itself, was a symphony of light and shadow, a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming odds. What did you think of Vincent's choice? Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories from the golden age of organized crime, check out the video I'm recommending next. I'll see you there.